The world is going to shit. So what else is new? And I was thinking about it, and it still amazes me that when you think about why this entire world is going to shit, because it's not just this country. I mean, this country is going to shit faster than pretty much any other country on the face of the earth. But this buffoon is wreaking havoc across the entire planet. And why is this happening? This is what's the most amazing thing to me. It's happening because of a subset of one political party in one country. MAGA Republicans in the United States. That's it. That's the reason. That's the reason that this criminal piece of shit is president of the United States and is in a position to do the damage that he's doing. It's all because a subset of the Republican Party has turned into a cult. And it's not the entire Republican Party, but let's be honest, it's probably the majority of them. May very well be the overwhelming majority of Republicans, but it's not all of them. And there is polling data over the last several months that I've covered that shows that fewer and fewer Republicans are self-identifying as MAGA Republicans. Now, what does it mean to identify as a MAGA Republican as opposed to just a Republican? Well, MAGA means Trump. That's all that Trump. MAGA is the cult. That's what the MAGA Republicans are. It's the cultists. Everybody knows this. Trump himself was just talking about this the other day when he kicked Tucker Carlson out of the cult. He said Tucker Carlson is not MAGA because Tucker Carlson was speaking out against the war in Iran. And Trump, in his comments there denouncing Tucker, said that Tucker's not MAGA. MAGA is Trump. Trump is MAGA. MAGA is Trump. And because Tucker Carlson is criticizing Trump or criticizing something that Trump is doing, he's by definition not MAGA. And he's right about that. That's what MAGA is. MAGA just means the cult. And if you're in the cult, then you're in all the way. You can't be part way in the cult. And to be in the cult, to be a MAGA Republican, is to support every single thing that Donald Trump says and does, period, without question. And so when pollsters ask Republicans, they poll Republicans, they establish that they're a Republican, and then they ask them, do you consider yourself a MAGA Republican? Fewer and fewer self-identified Republicans are identifying as MAGA. That means they don't support Trump. That's what, if a Republican says, I'm a Republican, but I'm not a MAGA Republican, it means I don't support Trump. Or at the very least, you don't support Trump no matter what. So the point is, not all Republicans are part of his cult. They are open to criticism of Trump. I mean, look, for example, Thomas Massie. He has support. He has support among Republicans. Anyone who's a Republican and supports Thomas Massie is not MAGA. You're not. I mean, Trump was in Kentucky yesterday trying to destroy Thomas Massie. Anyway, back to my original point. The country and the world is being destroyed because of the MAGA Republicans, that subset of the Republican Party who are part of his cult. Because they're the only reason, certainly, that he got elected, although he would not have gotten elected with MAGA Republicans alone. There aren't enough of them. He got elected because of MAGA Republicans voting in lockstep for Trump. Also because of other Republicans who, because they have an R after their name, couldn't consider voting for a Democrat, so they voted for Trump. And then, there are people, amazingly enough, there are people who voted for Obama. This is the craziest fucking thing. There are people who voted for Obama twice and voted for Trump. I mean, how does that fucking happen? Anyway, and there's people who voted for Biden in 2020 and then switched and voted for Trump. And there's people who never voted before. I mean, there's lots of people. But there's people who voted for Trump for a variety of reasons, including on some of the issues. They believe some of his bullshit. In fact, I got a tweet here that I wanted to get to. Let me see if I can find it. Because there's a lot of these MAGAs or former MAGAs, people who are turning on Trump or at least waking up, beginning to wake up. Who knows? They might go back, whatever. But they're all many of them are now talking about that they were fooled. They're admitting it. And that's a big deal for these people to admit it. And here's just one example. This guy wrote, and he's a big name account. And he wrote, "I was fooled by Trump. I'll admit it. I voted for Donald Trump. Back then, like millions of others, I believed the promises. Drain the swamp. Stand up to the global elites. Put the people first. It sounded like the beginning of a revolution. But years later, the truth looks very different. The wars didn't stop. The power structures didn't fall. The same financial empires still control the system. And the people, still struggling. It makes you wonder, was the outsider image real or just another performance inside the same political machine? Sometimes the hardest thing to admit is this. We wanted to believe, but believing doesn't make it true. If more people start questioning the system, maybe real change can finally happen." All right, so this is a Trump voter who is disillusioned with Trump. But here's what I don't get. I get about these people. The beginning, where he says, "I was fooled by Trump." Well, good. I'm glad you'll admit it. He believed the promises, and then he lists the promises. Drain the swamp. Stand up to the global elites. Put the people first. Those are the promises that this genius cites. Those are all meaningless slogans, genius. Promises, those aren't promises. You want promises from a politician, they should be specific. Not just meaningless slogans that could mean anything to whoever's listening to it. You believed slogans with nothing to back it up. Anyway, so the point is, I'm telling you, I'm going to finish this fucking point if it kills me. The point is, a lot of people voted for Trump for many different reasons. It's not just the cult. The cult alone could not have elected Donald Trump. But the cult is why Donald Trump remains president. That's the thing that is just so insane and so difficult to believe that we're here, because no other president, having done the things that Donald Trump has done and continues to do on a daily basis, no other president would survive this. Would have been impeached and removed long ago. Would have been convicted in that second impeachment trial for sure in his first term. And he would have been prohibited from running again. Never would have even had a chance to get reelected. Anyone else, other than Trump, would have been convicted in that second impeachment trial and would have been prosecuted and would almost certainly be in prison right now. Not having been reelected, not starting an illegal war with Iran, not plunging the global economy into crisis. Oil, I mean, some people are talking about now oil shooting up towards $200 a barrel at some point if this doesn't stop. All of this damage that this criminal has done. Why? Why is he in this position? Why is he not in prison for so many of the crimes that he very clearly committed? How the hell could he have gotten reelected? And how the hell has he not been removed by Congress yet in this second term? It's because of the cult. It's because a large part of the Republican Party has turned into a cult. So they cannot be reasoned with. And their support for him is total. And it's not at all dependent upon circumstances. It doesn't matter what he says. It doesn't matter what he does. They are personally devoted to him. Their personal identities are wrapped up in supporting Donald Trump. He is them. Now, they are not him. Donald Trump doesn't like his own supporters, okay? He just uses them. But he is them. Did I get that right? Yeah. He is them. They have adopted identifying with him as their own personal identity. So shallow and pathetic these people's lives are that they have taken this con artist personally as their own personal identity. And so the point is, you can't reason with him. And it doesn't matter what he does. Now, some people are waking up from the cult. That does happen. And it is happening. But you can't talk them out of it. You can't convince them to wake up. They have to come to it on their own. And some of them are. But let's face it, probably not a whole lot. And that's probably never going to happen, because for them to wake up, unlike this guy who admits it in his tweet there, most of them don't have the courage to admit it, because they'd have to be admitting something about themselves. And so much of this Trump cult phenomenon, it's not political. It's outside of politics. It's psychological with these fucking people. And for psychological reasons, most of them will never admit it. They will never admit that they were wrong. They will never admit that the people that they hate were right about him. So they're going to go down with the ship. And so those people just simply cannot be reached. And the problem is, those people are insane. Many of them. And many of them are dangerous. And I think we don't put enough emphasis on January 6th. January 6th, while it was not successful in overthrowing the results of the 2020 election and putting Trump back in office in 2021, it was successful in everything that followed. If January 6th did not happen, Donald Trump would have been convicted in that second impeachment trial. Of course, the second impeachment trial never would have happened but for January 6th. But the reason the senators, not enough of them, voted to convict him in that second impeachment trial was because of January 6th. They were afraid of his violent cult. They didn't want to put a target on themselves. And they talked themselves into voting to acquit, telling themselves, it doesn't, oh shit, what did I just do? I dropped my pen. I need my pen. I can't talk without my pen. There we go. Replacement. They talked themselves into believing that they don't really need to convict him. That he's going away anyway. After January 6th, he's never coming back. He's never going to be reelected. He's committed crimes. He'll be prosecuted. We don't have to worry about him. So why subject ourselves and our families for violence? Why put a target on our back for this violent, unhinged mob to come after us and our families? So they convinced themselves they didn't need to convict, and so they didn't. And that is one of the reasons, there's many, but that's one of the reasons why they don't oppose him now. And you may be thinking, well, Democrats have no problem voting to impeach, voting to convict, opposing him now. But here's the thing. The cult expects the Democrats to oppose him and to vote to impeach him and convict him. But they expect blind loyalty from Republicans. So if Democrats vote against Trump, vote to impeach, vote to convict, they don't consider those people to be traitors. But Republicans who vote against Trump, who vote to impeach or convict or oppose him now in any way, they're considered traitors. Again, look at Trump in Kentucky, going after Thomas Massey, calling him a traitor. He betrayed MAGA. He betrayed me. He's a traitor. Because Massey, as a Republican, is supposed to be blindly loyal to Trump. And so people hate those who they feel betray them far more than people that they already expect to be opposed to them. That's why they wanted to hang Mike Pence. They weren't talking about hanging Nancy Pelosi, although I'm sure they would have if they got their hands on her. But they weren't chanting, hang Nancy Pelosi. They were chanting, hang Mike Pence, because they considered him to be a traitor. That's why these Republicans, even now, don't speak up against Trump. And there's other reasons, too. Trump controls, the MAGA base, his cult makes up the overwhelming majority of the primary vote, the primary electorate in the Republican Party. And none of these people have a prayer of getting their party's nomination if they oppose Trump. So there's lots of reasons. Violence, normal politics, all that kind of stuff. But the point is, going back to my original point, I'm finally finishing up how long am I into this? 15 minutes. That's not bad. finishing up this point, the reason the entire world is being destroyed by this criminal buffoon is because of the cult, because they have put fear into the entire Republican Party such that they will not oppose Donald Trump. And of course, because let's face it, the real reason is because the American people are morons. Not all of them, obviously, but take a look around, guys. We're surrounded by fucking idiots in this country. And if the people were the backstop. It's a democracy after all. Ultimately, it's up to the people. Yes, Republicans are cowards. They should have convicted him. Yes, the Biden administration dropped the ball big time. And I'm going to get to this question that I didn't have time to get to last time about the Jack Smith investigation. So, yes, the Biden administration dropped the ball. Took way too long. I mean, it took 2 years to appoint Jack Smith as special counsel. If that had been done on day one, Donald Trump would be in prison today. So yes, all of those people, all of those institutions, the courts, they all failed us to get us to this position where Trump is in power. But ultimately, even with all of those failures, we would not be in this position but for the American people. They still voted to reelect him. Putting aside concerns about election fraud and all of that, they voted to reelect Donald Trump. It should have been an overwhelming landslide defeat for Trump in the last election, but it wasn't. And to those of you who believe that the election was rigged, the last election was rigged, and there are a lot of weird things, and I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just not. There are other people like Election Truth Alliance, people ask me about them a lot, who have done great work examining all the returns and doing statistical analysis and all this kind of stuff. And it's just, they make a very powerful case that there are things that just do not happen. And they are much more expert in this area. So I leave it to them. But the point is, none of that could even have, even if you would believe that it was stolen, that only can happen at the margins, right? It was a close election. To the extent a vote can be rigged, it can only be rigged if the election is close. And look what the polls were leading up to the election. Every damn poll, every freaking one was within the margin of error. Unless we're talking about real outliers. But for the most part, all the polls had it within the margin of error. That's a statistical tied race, and it was the whole time. That should not have been a statistically tied race at any point in time, and I don't give a shit who the Democratic nominee was. Should not have mattered. If Donald Trump, a literal fucking insurrectionist, convicted felon, adjudicated sexual abuser is on the ballot, I don't care what you think of the Democratic nominee. So ultimately, it is the stupidity of the American people who put us where we are. And the reason Donald Trump remains president and has not been impeached and removed as any other president who did a fraction of what Donald Trump has done since taking office in January of 2025. Any other president would have been impeached and removed by now for just a fraction of what he has done. The reason he's in office still is because of the cult. That subsection of the Republican Party that has turned into a mindless, violent, unhinged, lunatic fucking personality cult. That is why the entire fucking world is now subject to this madness. A subset of the Republican Party. And yes, it may be the majority of the Republican Party, and I'm sure that it is. But look, the Republican Party isn't even a majority party. I think there are more registered independents in this country now than there are registered Democrats or Republicans. And so we're talking about a subset of one fucking political party in one country that is propping this criminal up and the entire world being subjected to this. Insane. Now, I haven't done this show in several days, so I want to run through quickly some things that I've been meaning to get to, and then I want to talk about this Jack Smith business. And it's going to take me a couple of shows just to get caught up on the backlog here. But before I do, let me just check the news, see if anything has happened while I'm talking here. No, it doesn't look like it. So, by the way, this new leader of Iran has made a statement. From what I gather, it was a written statement. There's some question. It's being reported he might be in a coma. He might have been severely injured. I don't know what the extent of the injuries may be. They may be propping him up as sort of a symbolic leader. If that's the case, we don't really know who's in control. There's been actually no proof of life that this guy is even alive. So who the hell knows? But what's certainly the case is Iran is not folding. There's been no effective regime change. They're not giving in to Trump. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Trump, tough talking Trump telling these tankers, oh, put your big boy pants on. Show some guts. Just take your oil tankers. Just go straight through this Strait of Hormuz. What are you being a coward for? Well, they do it and they get attacked. Trump is a real tough guy, right? Remember, it reminds me, speaking of January 6th a minute ago, on January 6th when he told them all that he was going to go with them up to the Capitol. He got into the beast and drove back to the White House so he can watch it all on TV as his minion fucking cultists got all violent as he intended and went to Capitol Hill and did his bidding. And he was friggin' loving it. He wasn't there. Anyway, all right, now I'm stepping on that pen that I dropped. Okay, there we go. What else here? Anything else? Another thing is we're starting to hear a lot of chatter now about terrorism here in the United States. Apparently, there was an FBI warning that they wanted to put out, warning of possible terror attacks inside the United States. Trump quashed that. We learned about it anyway. Now they're warning about possible terrorist drone strikes in California. I don't know why specifically California, but that's the news there. And then I'm hearing more and more people all of a sudden talking about terrorism inside this country. It almost sounds like they're laying the groundwork. Like, I'm not a conspiracy guy. Like, I try not to I've never been one to just start speculating about all these kinds of conspiracies. I listen to them sometimes because, let's be honest, sometimes they're pretty entertaining, even if you don't believe in any of them. But with this administration, with Donald Trump, nothing is as it seems. They don't tell the truth about anything. So the only way, by definition, that you can try to ascertain the truth is try to figure it out on your own, because we're certainly not getting the truth from the Trump administration. And there is nothing, literally nothing, that I put past them. I believe they faked the hoax, that hoax assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania. I mean, that was too perfect. This man remember why he was running for president? He was running to stay out of prison. He was facing multiple indictments. If he had been convicted, he almost certainly would have gone to prison, and probably for the rest of his life. That's why he was running for president. That is a desperate, desperate man. What would he not be willing to do? Look what he did on January 6th. Because here's the thing. When we talk about that hoaxed assassination attempt, I have people, when they shoot it down, oh, well, people died. People died. The shooter's dead. Another guy in the audience, he's dead. So obviously it wasn't a hoax. People got killed. And I'm thinking, that's not proof that it wasn't hoaxed. Are you not familiar with Donald fucking Trump? People died on January 6th. You think he gives a shit about people getting killed if it gets him what he wants? No. And the truth is, we're lucky that only a few people died on January 6th. One of Trump's supporters, Ashley Babbitt, got shot trying to break into the Capitol. An officer, Sitnik, I think his name was, Sitnik, something like that. He died as a result of what happened on January 6th. We're lucky that many, many more people didn't die. Donald Trump knew what he was doing, and he had to know that many people could have gotten killed, and he didn't give a shit. So you think he cares about a couple of people getting killed in a fake assassination attempt? Hell, all the better, right? It makes it look more believable. So when people cite the fact that people got killed as proof that it wasn't a hoax, that's not proof to me at all. It was too perfect. Just a couple of months before the election. Remember, the election was statistically tied. A couple months before the election, that happens. What is the best way for a president to generate sympathy for himself? Survive an assassination attempt. So that conveniently happens. Supposedly gets a chunk of his ear blown off by a high-powered rifle, and then it just miraculously grows back. Bullshit. And then all of the things that happened. Have you guys really looked at the video of that thing? There is video from right in front of the stage. First of all, the whole thing, I didn't mean to go off on the assassination here, but this thing, we just moved on from it. And by the way, if it was real, if Donald Trump really survived an assassination attempt, he would never shut the fuck up about it. We would hear about it every single fucking day. If Donald Trump really got shot and survived it, he hardly ever talks about it. Anyway, let me just finish out this thought. Aside from the fact that the Secret freaking Service just propped him up there moments after he was supposedly shot by a sniper, they didn't know where this guy was. They didn't know who else might be in position to take shots anywhere in that crowd. They didn't jump on him and throw him to the ground and protect him until the scene was secure and get him out of there without exposing him. No, they stood him right up, right there on the stage. If there was any other snipers there, they would have had a perfect shot. And then they let him pose for that fucking picture. That stupid fight. This dumb motherfucker. You're telling me that after getting shot, he had the presence of mind to think, ooh, what can I say in this moment to rile up the crowd? And how can I pose for this picture so it'll be this great picture that I can use for my campaign? Really? No. There's not a chance. And then you see this video from in front of the stage. And you see a Secret Service agent lead photographers as they're standing him up, as the Secret Service in the middle of the stage is standing him up. The Secret Service agent leads these photographers over, puts them into the perfect position to take that iconic picture that he fucking used in his campaign. And at the same time that the Secret Service agent is putting these photographers into position, a crane operator is lowering a flag behind him in perfect alignment with the photographers, Trump, and the flag behind him. You're telling me that's all coincidental? Bullshit. That was the most perfectly staged photograph in American political history. And that just happened? Not a chance in fucking... Think of all the crazy ass things that happened, and they all happened. And it was all just a coincidence. The magic ear, it just missed them by an inch. No. I'm sorry. Where was I going with this? Oh, man, I got really sidetracked. All right, you guys are going to have to help me. What was I talking about? Okay, I was talking about... Let me go back here to the news. Oh, yeah, I got it. I got it. Terrorism. So it looks like, okay. I was talking about terrorism. And then I was talking about how I don't normally engage in conspiracy theories. And I'm not pushing a conspiracy theory here either. What I'm saying is we're not told the truth about literally anything. And there's absolutely nothing I put past this man. That's why we have to be really on guard in the election. Because they know they don't have a chance of winning unless they cheat, unless they rig them. And I don't know what they have up their sleeves. I'm not really worried about the things that most people are worried about, like the SAVE Act. I was going to talk about that. I'll see if I get to it. I'm not worried about the SAVE Act. First of all, I don't think it's going to pass. If it does pass, I don't think it's going to be sustained by the courts for a variety of reasons. I think it's going to be struck down very, very quickly. I'm not worried about it. And then on top of it, even if it's passed, even if it's upheld by the courts, even if it's allowed to stand for this election, and every day that goes by, we're getting closer to the election, less time to comply with this law, more likely that the courts at least put a hold on it for this election, even if it is passed. So for all these legal reasons, I'm not worried about it. On top of that, even if it does get implemented and it upheld by the courts, it's going to affect Republicans as much as Democrats. I don't know why people think, oh, it's screwed. The Democrats are screwed. It's going to elect Republicans forever. And Trump was out there the other day saying, if we can pass the SAVE Act, Republicans will never lose another election. Who cares what Trump says? Trump's a fucking idiot. Donald Trump thought that he could successfully redistrict Texas and it would all be to Republicans' benefit. That whole thing blew up in his face. Pretty much everything this guy does blows up in his face, and I think the SAVE Act will blow up in his face too, because Republicans would be subjected to it just like Democrats. I didn't want to get off on this. All right, let me just finish this thought real quick. I'll talk more about this in depth in a standalone video because it's important. But one of the reasons why it will blow up in his face is because the SAVE Act puts all these barriers in front of voters in order to vote, which is one of the reasons it's going to be struck down by the courts. It's also a poll tax. I mean, there's so many reasons this is not going to survive a court challenge. But even if it does, you have to jump through all these hoops just to vote. Why is that going to blow up in Trump's face? Because that's a lot of work just to cast your ballot. So guess what is really important? If it's really a pain in the ass to vote, motivation is important. And all the polling data shows that Democrats are far more enthusiastic about voting in November than Republicans are. So if you're faced with all these fucking impediments and you're like, one side is, roaring and ready to go, they can't friggin' wait to vote. The other side is more, this isn't going the way I thought. I'm disappointed. I don't want to go through all those hoops. That actually, I think the SAVE Act, for many reasons, including that one, actually benefits Democrats. I think if it does get passed and implemented, it's going to blow up in Trump's face. Stop assuming that this guy is smart. Never forget that this guy's a blithering fucking idiot. And nearly everything he does blows up in his face, and the SAVE Act will too. I'm not saying that I don't oppose it. It's a horrible law. It should not pass and should be struck down by the courts. But I'm not worried about it as some people are. I'm much more worried about the illegal things that they're going to do. ICE and at polling stations, Insurrection Act to put active duty military, and then this. This is where I was going with the terrorism stuff. All of a sudden, they're starting to talk about terrorism. The FBI obviously is on alert for terrorism with good reason. I mean, we're told that Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and then we've been carpet bombing them for 2 weeks. What do we expect? Terrorism is not going to be a possibility? So yeah, it's a real possibility, but now a bunch of them are talking about it. Ted Cruz is out there warning about terrorism now all of a sudden and saying if any terrorism happens, it's, Joe Biden's fault. Who else? Tucker Carlson is out there saying that he thinks that terrorism is going to be used as a means to get ground troops on the ground in Iran. That regime change, they're not going to do it for regime change. But if there's terrorism, if we get struck inside this country, 9/11 style, that would give us the political will to put troops on the ground in Iran. And so Tucker Carlson is talking about that. So all these people all of a sudden talking about terrorism. And it's got me thinking, Donald Trump is desperate to either cancel the elections or to nationalize the elections, to give him control over the elections, right? People are worried about that with the war. I'm not worried about it with the war. All right? That argument's not going to... We have never not had an election. First of all, it would not be legal under any scenario, but we all know Trump doesn't give a shit about the law. And we worry about the courts because they're so fucking corrupt. But we have had elections during war many, many times. We had elections during the Civil War, both world wars. I mean, that's not going to get you where you need to go. So what else could they do to try to give him all the special emergency power? How about another 9/11? I'm just saying, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm not saying this is what they're going to do, but people, I'm starting to think it's not outside the realm of possibility that they pull a false flag terrorism attack inside this country and then say we are under threat. And when the courts inquire about stuff, he'll be able to say, I can't tell you that. I have to keep that. That's highly classified. We can't let that information get out. We're trying to protect this country against terrorism. And in order to do it, they're targeting our elections. I need complete control over the elections. We need to count the ballots at the federal government level. Maybe that's what they're going to try to do. Don't think that would work either, but who the hell knows? And they're desperate to try anything. So I'm just saying, I just find it very suspicious that all of a sudden, all these fucking people are talking about terrorism. And we know how desperate this guy is not to lose the midterms. And it's because of, again, Epstein. Because why is Donald Trump so desperate not to lose Congress? Thank you, Jane. Why is he so desperate? It's not because of his legislative agenda. I've said this a million times. He doesn't have a legislative agenda. So what does he give a shit if Congress doesn't pass any laws? He doesn't go to Congress for the most part anyway. He just does everything by executive order. That's not what he's worried about. He doesn't give a fuck about keeping Congress in his controls to pass his legislation. No. He cares because he doesn't want Congress investigating him. He doesn't want Congress subpoenaing documents from the Epstein estate, putting witnesses under oath in front of, in Congress, in public hearings, survivors, people who know what this piece of shit did, putting them under oath. He doesn't want that happening. That's why he is so desperate to keep control of Congress. And I don't put anything about him. I don't put anything past him. All right, let me hit some of these things real quick. Joe Rogan, more from Joe Rogan, speaking out against Trump's war. But, thanks, Joe. A little late now, jackass. You gave him 3 hours on your show and endorsed him. All you fucking podcast bros, fucking idiots. I was listening to a podcast the other day. This just goes to show you what these Trumpers think they might be able to get away with. They don't understand the law or the Constitution at all. And I know people are worried about the courts, as you rightly should be. But some things are just so beyond the pale that I'm really not worried about them. Look, they struck him down on the tariffs. That is huge. And there are things, as I explained, legally about that case. And the precedent that case cited, especially Justice Gorsuch's concurring opinion, he at length talked about the Steele seizure case from 1952, I believe, which is right on point in terms of the limits of presidential power for when Trump tries to take over elections. And so the precedent of the tariffs case is going to be used very directly by the courts to shut him down on some of this election stuff. But these people, they don't know a damn thing about the courts, about the law, about the Constitution. So they think that some of this stuff might work. And so I was listening to a podcast, and there was a top Trump advisor. I forget this woman's name. I think from the first administration. And they were talking about the war. And she said, Congress has no role in declaring war. Only the president does. And the host of the podcast was like, what are you talking about? Let me read the Constitution for you. Then he read the line about, only Congress has the authority to declare war. And this fucking idiot who was a top presidential advisor was like, had this shocked look on her face. Like, this is the first time she ever heard it. It wasn't typical lying bullshit. She really thought that Congress has no role in declaring war. Telling you, these people that Trump surrounds himself with, blithering idiots, which is also very dangerous, because when they are concocting these plans to try to take over control of the elections or try to cancel elections, they may really believe that the president does have authority to cancel elections if we're at war, or if there's a terrorist attack, that actually would give him authority to cancel elections or federalize elections or whatever the hell he wants to do. Now, none of that does, and it's not going to work, if he tries to cancel elections. I don't give a fuck what happened. War, terrorism. He's not canceling elections. There's not a chance that that's happening. And he can't just, with the stroke of a pen, federalize them. There would have to be legislation passed by Congress that's consistent with the Constitution that would allow the federal government a greater role in the administration of our elections. He's not going to get away with it by just doing it on his own with an executive order. But he and the people around him might think it will work just because they're so fucking stupid and don't understand any of this stuff. So they may think, hell, if we do a false flag terrorism attack inside this country, then you could issue an executive order and cancel elections or take over the elections. Now, it wouldn't work, as I said, but I think they don't know that. They think it really might work, which makes it more likely they might do something like that. That makes sense? Anyway, let me see what else I have here. Back to the Epstein. Ted Lieu, I think it was out there saying, and I've talked about this too, but to hear a member of Congress say this, at a press conference, he said that foreign hackers probably have all the Epstein files, all the stuff that's being hidden, all the stuff that's being covered up. Foreign hackers probably have it because the FBI files or the DOJ databases were all hacked a few years ago. And a sitting member of Congress is saying, yep, a foreign hacker, and we don't know who. Maybe lots of people have it at this point, have those files. And that sure would explain a lot, wouldn't it? I fully believe that Putin has those files, knows what he did with Epstein, knows what he did to children, and much, much worse. I think they've had compromise on Trump going back decades, from the 80s. I'm sure Benjamin Netanyahu has a file like this on Trump with all of this stuff. Hey, thank you. I appreciate that. Glad you're enjoying it. Glad you're here too. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. So here you have a sitting member of Congress saying, yeah, foreign hackers probably have all this information. And that sure would explain a lot, wouldn't it? Trump being dragged around by the nose, doing the bidding of other countries. By the way, did you hear this scumbag the other day? Because clearly Iran was no threat. They weren't about to have nuclear weapons. They weren't threatening us. All of it was bullshit. And he said, well, I believe that they did. Jared told me that they probably do. And I thought that maybe they did. And so that's why I struck. Is that the legal standard? A gut feeling? Because your son-in-law said they probably do? A real estate developer, son-in-law, told you that, they probably have nukes within 2 weeks. We better strike them. That fits the legal standard. Again, no other president would survive this. No other president. I mean, he admits things that should instantly result in his impeachment and removal from office. He just admitted. He took this country to war. Americans have been killed. He blew up a school full of children, 180 children murdered. Why? The entire world in chaos. Why? Because his real estate developer son-in-law said, yeah, they probably got nukes. And Trump, I thought they probably did. No evidence, no proof, no going to Congress. And every member of Congress who gets these briefings from the Pentagon, they all come out saying the same thing. It's worse than we thought. They have nothing. They have no proof of anything, and they don't have any idea what the fuck they're doing either. We are lied to about everything. That's why I don't put anything past them. That's why you kind of have to engage in, I don't want to say conspiracy theory, but speculation. As conspiracy theory gets a bad rap. I shouldn't even use that phrase. Because anytime you say something's a conspiracy theory, people think it's just crazy and it's wrong. Sometimes conspiracy theory is correct. So the point is we have to engage in speculation because we don't know the truth. Thank you. Appreciate it. We're never told the truth. We know that what we're being told is not true. So if we're going to try to figure out what is true, we're going to have to take what we do know and what we know about this fucking criminal and try to figure out on our own what the truth might be. Because we don't have the truth. And we don't want to get caught flat-footed. That's why we have to engage in so much speculation about the elections. We know they're lying to us about everything. And we know he wants to steal the election. So we have to figure out, what's he going to do? What might he do? Truth is, nobody freaking knows. Anyway, let me see what else here. There's a poll. See if I can find it. A poll, a majority of likely American voters. This is from Zeteo. This is Mehdi Hassan's website. A majority of likely American voters believe that Donald Trump launched the war on Iran, at least in part, to distract from the Epstein scandal that has engulfed his presidency. The survey found that a solid 52-40 majority of voters agreed with the statement, with other 8% saying they don't know. Well, there's always a significant percentage who doesn't know anything. Anyway, so according to at least this poll, I can't see what the poll is. Where is this poll from? Data for Progress. Anyway, a majority of likely voters thinks that we're in Iran because Trump is covering up the Epstein files and what he did to children. And just think about that alone. There are allegations contained in FBI files released by the Department of Justice, and these are the ones that were released. And there's still a shit ton they're still covering up. But in what they have already released, there are FBI documents that from a witness that the FBI found credible. They interviewed her multiple times. Apparently, they wanted to proceed with charges. The victim did not, claiming that Donald Trump raped her and assaulted her. That's in FBI fucking files. Why is this entire country not halted until we get to the bottom of that? Can you imagine any other president if files contained in the FBI came out that said he raped a child when she was 13 or 14 years old? Would we just carry on? And what percentage of the American people do you think are even aware of that? I would say it is a shockingly small minority of people who are even aware of that. How would you? It's not really it's not really reported on by mainstream outlets. Not that mainstream outlets are, mainstream outlets are a shrinking part of the media landscape anyway. Unless most people see it on Netflix or TikTok or something, they're not going to know about it. Anyway. Okay. Oh shit. I don't have time to get all this other stuff. I promised I would get to this Jack Smith question, and so I shall. So this is a question I got last week. Person asked, you are an ex-prosecutor, if I remember correctly. You did. If you were in the position of Jack Smith and were tasked to handle the Trump's insurrection case, what would you do differently / how would you handle it in general? Maybe you see some key points where mistakes were made that lead to delay in handling the case and such. Okay. I could go on literally for hours about this. This is something that really pisses me off. And honestly, most of my anger is not at Jack Smith. Jack Smith, generally speaking, did a fantastic job. However, we have learned things in the last couple of months that are very disappointing. A key mistake that he made that was, in my opinion, really fucking stupid. And in the opinion of people on his special counsel staff, really fucking stupid. Putting that aside, however, he did a fantastic job. I don't like when people beat up on Jack Smith for it taking so long. The real fault lies with two people, Joe Biden and Merrick Garland. And I'm going to tell you another thing that pisses me off. When Democrats put all the blame on Merrick Garland and they don't want to criticize Biden. That pisses me off because it's the same kind of bullshit that Republicans do. Never blame their guy. Never blame the president. Never blame their guy. Yeah, if you're going to be honest, Joe Biden deserves, in my opinion, most of the blame. Joe Biden nominated Merrick Garland. Joe Biden kept Merrick Garland. All right? And don't give me, the Department of Justice is independent. That's bullshit. Donald Trump has proven it's bullshit. It's not true. The Department of Justice is in the executive branch. The President of the United States, constitutionally speaking, can go and put a desk in the Department of Justice and be involved in every single case if he wants to. Now, that's not appropriate, and I'm not even suggesting Joe Biden should have done that. What he should have done is simply appointed a special counsel on day one. And then he could have just been hands off at that point. Look, a former president had just tried to overthrow the fucking republic. Okay? That doesn't warrant a special prosecutor be assigned. All you do is you appoint a special counsel on day one and then let the chips fall where they may. You don't have to direct the prosecution. You don't have to be involved in the day-to-day. You could be completely hands-off. Let the special counsel and the DOJ be independent. Let them do their work. Just appoint a special fucking counsel. Didn't do that. Merrick Garland didn't do it. Merrick Garland works for Joe Biden. Joe Biden could have said, hey, I want a special counsel appointed on day one. We can't let this stand. Anyone who committed crimes in trying to overthrow this republic needs to be held accountable. You don't have to say, I want Trump prosecuted. I want this person prosecuted. You just say, this was the greatest crime against this country ever perpetrated. I want a special counsel on day one to get to the bottom of it. He could have appointed an entire commission. He could have appointed an entire task force inside the Department of Justice. Thank you, Ellen. He could have done any one of those things, and it wouldn't have interfered with the independence of the DOJ at all. You just appoint those people, put them in place, tell them, I want this fully investigated, and anyone who may have committed a crime, they need to be held accountable. That's it. You don't have to direct them against Trump or anyone else. But you should have made that investigation happen. And he didn't. And Merrick Garland didn't. And when it was clear that Merrick Garland was not going to, he should have replaced Merrick Garland. But the Biden administration, the entire approach of the Biden administration was, let's just move on. Trump is in the rearview mirror. Let's just move on. That is the exact wrong thing to have done. Biden's approach is why we are where we are. If Biden had done what I said and appointed special counsel on day one, Trump would be in prison today. I don't think there's any question about it, because it took 2 years for Merrick Garland to appoint a special counsel. And he only did it, if you'll remember, the only reason he did it is because the January 6th committee in Congress had those public hearings and brought to light all this information that directly implicated Donald Trump. And the political pressure was such that Merrick Garland didn't have a choice anymore, so he appointed Jack Smith. Now, Jack Smith had lost 2 years. The primary election for the presidential race was already getting going when Jack Smith got appointed. We were already in a presidential cycle when Jack Smith began his investigation. Now he's got to get all of this done. He's supposed to, he had to investigate from day one. He had to start the investigation. He had to overcome all kinds of things to get testimony from people, investigate it, then charge these people, then go through all the pretrial shit to get to trial. He's going to do that in 2 years before the election? Not a chance in hell. And you know what? And this is why hats off to Jack Smith. Even if the Supreme Court had ruled in a timely fashion, even with that horrible immunity decision, the real damage that they did was delaying it for so long. It was the delay that prevented Jack Smith from putting Trump on trial. Not the decision itself. It was a terrible decision, and it would have precluded some of the evidence that could have been used against Trump at trial, but it didn't dismiss the charges, and the cases against Trump were still going to be strong, even with evidence that would have been excluded because of that decision. Donald Trump still would have been convicted. It was the delay. They delayed it so long that it wasn't possible to get Trump on trial. And the reason that all happened is because at the beginning of the administration, Joe Biden said, let's move on, and they didn't do shit for 2 years. If they had done it on day one, we would have been 2 years further along in the process. Where we were at the end of the Biden administration with Trump's cases, he had been indicted. We had already had a Supreme Court decision. All of that could have been we could have been in that place 2 years before. And if we had been, all of Donald Trump's trials would have been would have taken place already, and he likely would have been convicted and his appeals already heard. He would be in prison today. The decision of Joe Biden to, let's just move on, that's why Donald Trump is president today. And that's him and Merrick Garland. And for all I know, I don't know the communications between Biden and Merrick Garland. For all I know, Biden might have said, I don't want you guys to go after Trump. Because there's no way Merrick Garland would have allowed Jack Smith to indict Donald Trump without Joe Biden's say so. There's no way that doesn't get the approval of the president before it proceeds. No way. So Joe Biden would have had to at least approve that anyway, and maybe he just killed it in the beginning. Maybe that's why Merrick Garland, and this is just speculation, admittedly, I don't know. Maybe that's why Merrick Garland didn't pursue Donald Trump from the beginning and was just going after the low-level people who broke in. Maybe that's the reason, because he was told not to. I don't know. But all I know is the buck stops with the fucking president. And I don't care what Joe Biden intended to do when he got elected, what his plans were for his term. Okay, after he was elected in November, that's when the insurrection happened. When that happened, he had an obligation to protect the country from that fucking criminal insurrectionist. He had an obligation to the Constitution and to the American people to make sure that attempt to overthrow our republic, that all those people involved were held accountable. He decided, I don't want them all held accountable. The people who broke into the Capitol, the people who took a shit on the floor and rubbed it on the walls, the people who broke into Nancy Pelosi's office, yeah, go after those people, but hands off Trump. Let's just move on. Anyway, I do want to get back to the Jack Smith point. So that's the real problem, not Jack Smith. And if you don't understand how prosecutions work, all the minutia and everything involved, especially in prosecuting a president, Jack Smith did just amazing work. Because, like I said, he had to investigate it from the beginning, which means you had to have a grand jury investigation. You had to call witnesses. The people with the most evidence against Trump were the people who were closest to Trump, who planned this with Trump, who saw him on January 6th in the days leading up to it, who heard what he said, who saw what he did. Those people weren't talking voluntarily. So you had to subpoena them to the grand jury and put them under oath. Well, as soon as you subpoena them, what do? They run to the court to try to block the subpoena. They want to quash the subpoena, is the legal term for that. And so that means now you have to litigate that. So every one of those top aides, Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, his White House counsel, all of these people, in order to get them under oath before a grand jury, you had to litigate each one of their cases. Because Trump was claiming executive privilege, they were asserting executive privilege. You had to get a court order to force each and every one of them to testify. That takes a long time. But guess what? He did it. He put them all under oath. He got their testimony. That was a big deal. That's before he even indicted anyone. Then he gets them indicted. All that investigation that had to take place before indictment. Then it's indicted. Then it goes in front of a court. Now, Trump and his lawyers get to offer all these pretrial motions, all these delay tactics. Oh, I'm a former president. I get special treatment. I have executive privilege. You can't indict a president. All of this stuff, all of that stuff had to be litigated. Now, even in a normal case, there's pretrial motions that get litigated. But when you're trying to prosecute a former president for things that he did while he was president, now you got all kinds of additional legal questions, questions that have never been raised, legal questions that have never been litigated in the history of our country. Now you had to go through all of that process before you can ever even put him on trial. Jack Smith had to do all of that in this truncated timeline thanks to Joe Biden and Merrick Garland. So, mostly I'm pissed at Joe Biden and Merrick Garland, and I fucking am so sick of the people who defend Joe Biden, because there is no defense of Joe Biden. The only reason to defend Joe Biden is if you're a partisan hack Democrat and you do the same thing that fucking partisan hack Republicans do. You just defend your guy. Oh, it's not his fault. The fuck it ain't his fault. It's Joe Biden's fault more than anyone else, because the buck stops with him. He could have fired Merrick Garland. He could have appointed a special counsel on day one. So anyway, now, as to Jack Smith, specifically, if I had been appointed, what would I have done differently? Now, I'm not going to, Jack Smith had a phenomenal career, phenomenal lawyer, phenomenal prosecutor. But thinking, you know, of course, I have the benefit of hindsight, and I'm sure he might have done things differently too. That being said, I think there are two big things that I want to focus on real quick. The two different cases. So you got the January 6th insurrection case, then you got the Mar-a-Lago stolen documents case. In the January 6th insurrection case, I think the big problem that I would have done differently is that he didn't indict him for insurrection or seditious conspiracy. Now, this is admittedly more of a political criticism than a legal one, because I know why he didn't indict him for insurrection and seditious conspiracy. I'm sure there's a very good legal reason, because here's the thing. When you're a prosecutor and you're looking at a factual circumstance, oftentimes there are many statutes that they violated, many crimes you could potentially charge them with. Some are stronger cases than others. And sometimes as prosecutors, you're like, okay, we've got these cases. These are strong cases. He's also good for these cases. We could indict him on these charges too, but those are going to be harder to prove, or they might take longer. There might be more evidentiary hearings required, whatever. There could be other things involved. So you go with your strongest, most easy to prove cases. So I understand. I think that's why he didn't charge him with insurrection or seditious conspiracy, because those are much more difficult charges to prove. They have to do with motive much more than other charges. When motive is a central part, the state of mind, what the defendant intended, that's always much more difficult to prove that. And you got to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Every element of the crime, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So I could see maybe Jack Smith looked at that and said, we could charge him with insurrection. We could charge him with seditious conspiracy. But man, that's going to be tough. These other charges are easier. Let's just go with those. So I think that's probably prosecutorially why they made that decision. But the problem is politically, not charging him with insurrection, not charging him with seditious conspiracy. It allowed his supporters to say, oh yeah, if it was an insurrection, why wasn't he charged with insurrection? You heard that. You remember that, right? Well, it's kind of a powerful argument to people who don't understand how this stuff works. And so you think my channel's fucked up? I don't know in what way you think my channel's fucked up. Technically speaking, or you don't like me. If it's the latter, you can go fuck yourself. I don't care. If it's the former, sorry, I don't know what's wrong. Okay. I guess I'll find out when this is done. Thank you. Where's I going with this? Anyways, you need to prove each element beyond a reasonable doubt. So the politics of this. And you heard this, and this was a powerful argument of Trump supporters saying, yeah, well, if it was really insurrection, then why wasn't he charged with insurrection? And, the American people were barraged with, on the one hand, Trump's a criminal. He committed this crime. He's an insurrectionist. On the other hand, all his supporters, they're just targeting Trump. This is all political. This wasn't insurrection. If it was insurrection, why wasn't he charged with insurrection? So all of this we were in the context of an election, and it gave Trump's supporters a powerful rhetorical weapon not to have charged him with insurrection or seditious conspiracy. So that is, to me, a problem. I think it would have been better, because I read the statutes. He was guilty of insurrection. He was guilty of seditious conspiracy. I think they could have made those charges. I think it would have been better to just charge him with everything that you could, everything that you believed as a prosecutor that you could prove, and then let the chips fall where they may. Put it on trial, submit it all to a jury. If the jury wants to convict on some charges and not on others, fine. We do that all the time. That's what should have been done. So that is one thing I would have done differently. And again, maybe Jack Smith would have done differently too. I don't know. The other thing, and this is a much bigger deal, and that is in the Mar-a-Lago case. He charged it in Florida, which, as it turned out, was a huge fucking mistake, because it got in front of Judge Aileen Cannon, who was not going to let Donald Trump be convicted. And in fact, she dismissed the case. She dismissed the indictment on the basis that she found the special counsel was illegally appointed, which was absurd. And if Donald Trump hadn't been reelected, I am exceedingly confident that the appellate court would have overturned her decision, would have reinstated the indictment, and may very well have at that point removed her from the case, because they had already slapped her down big time twice before. Third strike, that might have been it. They might have removed her from the case. We'll never know now. So he made the mistake of doing this in Florida. Now, I understand why he did, and this is what we've learned in the last couple of months. There's been reporting on this, I think, from Carol Lenig, I believe, in her book, that there were members of his team, the special counsel's team, who told him, you better not file it in Florida. Are you out of your damn mind? You have a decent shot of getting Cannon. And they knew all about Cannon. And they knew if it got in front of her, the case was cooked. And Jack Smith, apparently, according to the reporting, thought that there was a very little chance, like 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 or something like that, which to me is not that small of a chance. But what it actually was more like a 1 in 3 chance. And he filed it in Florida. He could have filed it in Washington, probably, and he could have filed it in New Jersey, because we're talking about stolen documents. Okay, he stole them from Washington, D.C. He took them down to Florida. Now, some of those charges, some obstruction charges and stuff, probably only could have been filed in Florida, because that's where they happened. But some of those charges could have been filed in D.C. Maybe you could have gotten them all filed in D.C. because of the connection with all the cases. Some of them could have been filed in New Jersey. And what he could have done, too, is, I'm going to file some of them in Florida, some of them in Washington, and some of them in New Jersey. Could have done that. But instead, he went all or nothing in Florida. And his own staff said that is a disastrous mistake. He said, nah, it'll be fine. And we know how it turned out. It was, in fact, a disastrous mistake. And that was a legal decision where to file. And that was a huge. And because the Florida cases against Donald Trump were so slam dunk, he didn't have a legal leg to stand on. In fact, reporting it was a couple months ago, that Trump knew that Jack Smith had him dead to rights in Florida. He knew it. And he did. I mean, this is an easy case to prove, and serious. The Mar-a-Lago cases would have sent him to prison for life. No doubt. Anyway, so those are the things that I would have done differently, or probably in retrospect should have been done differently. It's always easy to say what you would have done differently when you weren't the one there. But just looking back at it in retrospect, those are mistakes, I think. But, whatever. I will tell you this, though, with respect to the Mar-a-Lago case, because none of these charges can come back. Statute of limitations, except for maybe the Mar-a-Lago. Not any of the charges that he was indicted for, but treason has no statute of limitations. And I think what Donald Trump did may very well have been treason. And I don't know this for sure. I don't have all the facts. But why did he have all those documents? And he had a shit ton of documents. Why? Just to brag to people at his golf club that he had these documents? No, I don't think so. Not for a second. I think he stole those documents to sell them. Sell them to foreign countries, or maybe he was told to do it. Maybe Putin instructed him to. I mean, can you see? I could see a scenario. Putin tells him, take these documents, keep them in your bathroom, keep them in the storage closet, and here's what you're going to do. I'm going to send 2 guys over. You're going to admit them into your country club. Here's their names. Make them members of your country club. Leave the keys to the closet here, and my guys will go in there and make copies of whatever whatever. Can you see that happening? I could see that happening. I can also see him selling those things. I don't know. But if any of those things happen, you very well may have treason charges. And there is no statute of limitations for treason. And the potential punishment for treason. I bring this up because I'm not saying this is going to happen, but the possibility is there. If a Democrat wins the presidency in 2028, and if he or she had the stones to reopen that investigation, and if the facts warrant to prosecute Donald Trump for treason, then that could still be done when he leaves office. So unfortunately, I don't expect that to happen. That's what should happen. If I were president in 2029, that's what I would fucking do. I would reopen all of these things to see if there's any criminal charges we could still bring. And I would specifically want it looked into whether or not he committed treason. Anyway, just something to think about. All right, I guess before I go, I should have done this sooner. I never do this. I'm really bad at this. Please subscribe on whatever platform you're watching this. I'm recording this live right now on YouTube as a live stream, but it's going to be put back up later on YouTube as a new upload. It's going to be on other platforms. Wherever you're hearing this or watching it, please subscribe. It really does help grow this show. And it's going to help notify you in the future about any of my uploads. So anyway, that's it. I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate the support you all show me. It means a great deal. I hope you have enjoyed this, and we'll do it again real soon.